good morning to everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I think there's quite a few familiar names on the list who I have met over the years. My name's Sam. I manage our accountancy and finance division at the One Group. I've been with the business now for, scares me to say, 9 years. They've flown by. And during that time, I've always looked after sort of accountancy and finance. We've seen a lot of changes to the syllabus, et cetera, over that 9 years, but probably nothing has sped up changes and innovation quite as much as the last 12-18 months has forced us to. So very kindly joined this morning by our friends over at First Intuition, Ben and Gareth, who I'll hand you over to in a few seconds, who are going to be talking you through, qualifications update, some of the incentives and grants that the government have put in place as well. We want this session to be interactive. We've deliberately sort of targeted a small, more round table kind of feel to it so that you can ask as many questions as possible. These guys have got a wealth of knowledge, so please ask any question that you wish. No questions are going to be off topic, so feel free to ask them anything. Ben and Gareth will choose whether they wish to answer it, but feel free to ask away. We are going to do sort of a Q&A at the end, but probably what's best while stuff is fresh in the memory, if you use the chat function where Gareth has just written, "Hi everyone," hopefully that's popped up. If you think of something that's relevant to that topic, that slide at that point, feel free to just write in there, type in there, and Ben and Gareth can answer it as we go along. But if you want to save a question to the end, it's more general off topic, etc., then we can do that. The slides will be made available today as well as a recording. There are a few people who unfortunately weren't able to make today's session because it coincided with it being 28 degrees and then probably wanting to be sunbathing or whatever else they've got to do, which is more important than this. So we will make it the slides available afterwards. There's going to be some interactive stuff on the slides that you can click as well. So we'll get that all across to you afterwards. We're recording the session, so if you want to share it, watch it back, etc., that's all going to be good. So yeah, if everyone's happy with that and there's no questions from that, I'll hand you over to Ben and Gareth and see you all shortly. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sam, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on what could be the hottest day of the year. They say that nearly enough every day, don't they? And I'm not quite sure, but it's still looking pretty sunny out there now. We're not going to keep you for long this morning. Hopefully we can get through what we wanted to cover in around 40-45 minutes with a chance for you to ask questions. And echoing Sam's thoughts there, please use the chat box. We are getting incredibly used to using chat boxes now to communicate with groups, and particularly groups of learners, as lots of our courses have been delivered over Zoom in the last 15 months. So my name is Ben Bullman. I am a tutor and a director at First Intuition. I cover the Cambridge and Peterborough delivery centres, but work quite closely with my colleagues across wider East Anglia, so covering Norwich and Ipswich, and also down into Chelmsford and Essex. I'm joined this morning by Gareth, our Chief Executive. So good morning, Gareth.
Morning, Ben, and morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. Yeah, I've been training accountants nearly 25 years now. And actually, I'd echo what Sam said. You know, the last few years have seen some incredible changes, you know, more than I've seen in the previous couple of decades. And this last 15 months, particularly, I think for me and Ben, it has been constant adaptation and evolution, and, you know, keeping up to date with what the different awarding bodies are doing, changes to the apprenticeship systems. So it's been a busy time, certainly not been boring, has it, Ben?
It's we're coming to a very exciting time now where some of the stuff that we've been forced into, and I'm sure in your own businesses and organizations, there are things that have been forced upon you due to COVID. We're now looking at taking the good out of those and thinking, actually, there are some things we've done very, very quickly to reflect the need, but they're things that have been well received and things that we now want to take forward. So hopefully we can give a bit of a reflection back into what we've done, but also more looking forward to what is coming in our space of accountancy and wider training. So let's kick off with a bit of context. What are we seeing in our particular field of accounting? Recruitment, first of all. So at the start of the pandemic, this time last year or slightly earlier in 2020, we were thinking, is this going to mean employers do not recruit this year? There was some nervousness about summer intakes, but I was really, really pleased. And I think that the message we heard a lot from employers was, in the last financial crisis, they changed their recruitment plans, took on less staff. In the short term, possibly okay, but then lots of employers found that caused a medium-term issue of skills gaps, problem developing people through the ranks of their organization. And that was something we tried to message on early in 2020 when the pandemic first hit. And luckily, lots of our employers followed suit and did recruit usual numbers. And actually, we had bumper intakes throughout the back end of 2020 and into early 2021. A couple of things we did see was a bit more spreading of that intake. So traditionally, businesses, organizations have looked to recruit school, college, university leavers that are free agents from late June, early July, onboarding in August, really getting started in September. That still happened, but we also had a number of students and cohorts of intakes that were spread maybe later into the year. And we had good numbers of people starting with us actually in January through to March, April. We've had a good spread of intake. Whether that's something we will see to continue, we will monitor that, but it's certainly something that's made us aware of the need to have a spread intake. Not everybody starts with the more traditional school year. Gareth, I don't know if you've got any perspective on what you are hearing currently about this year's intake.
Well, I think, and I'm sure people on the call will agree, accountants have been busy, busier than ever during the pandemic, whether it's, coping with new government support measures, and a lot of accountants have been involved in, administering the furlough scheme, or, the various loans that have been available. Sometimes that's pushed back their regular work, so they're then on catch up with the regular work that they still have to do. But I think, the last 50 months has proved just how important accountants and finance professionals are in organizations to help navigate, cash flow and working capital management when things are obviously very uncertain. And, we've seen such swings. I think of it like a bungee jump. We've seen swings in sectors from nothing happening, during tight lockdowns to then loads happening very, very quickly, and the need to really ramp up supply chains and ramp up delivery. Sometimes when staff have been furloughed for many months, obviously industries and sectors like hospitality, travel, hotels, restaurants, they've had really, ups and downs over the last 15 months. But I think accountants on the whole seem to have been extremely busy. As you said, I think a lot of employers wanted to avoid the mistakes made a decade or so ago. I was training during the financial crash, and we saw a massive drop in recruitment and intakes and training of accountants at that point. And I think there's organizations that even today are seeing the negative effect of that, at high level senior progression, inability to find partners or directors at top level because they didn't recruit 12 years ago. So I have heard an awful lot of employers saying they don't want to repeat those errors. They are still looking to, recruit, bring their trainees in. The issue I do hear a lot, and I get Sam would probably be able to give a very good perspective on this, is that whilst entry-level recruitment has still been going ahead, I know that recruiting for qualified, experienced accountants is just getting harder and harder and harder. I mean, that's something I've been hearing for many years, but I think it seems to be a real crescendo at the moment that recruitment and attraction. I know it's something the one group would be looking at in a lot of detail, how to make packages attractive for that kind of experienced seniors. But looking forward to this year, I mean, what we're hearing. In fact, I was on a national call for the First Intuition Network earlier this week, and despite having had a record intake over the last 6 or 8 months, we're expecting a 40% increase, I think, Ben, nationally in particularly apprenticeship starts through the kind of back end of this year and into early 2022. So, reassuring from the perspective, I think, of our sector that employers are still, recruiting, they're still developing, they're still training, they're recognizing how important finance skills are, whether things are going, challenging, if things are difficult, or things are going really well. You need accountants in both situations. So, it's certainly keeping us busy, isn't it, Ben?
It is indeed. And one of the things we have been seeing is maybe businesses scaling up their recruitment plans a bit. So traditionally, where a business was looking to take on one person this summer, that's probably going to be two now. And we've seen it similarly where an organization would usually take on 4 or 5 school leaver or graduate recruits, that may be going up to 7 or 8. I think a couple of reasons for that. One is the caliber of individuals available. And I think lots of employers are saying to us, we've had so many good applicants that we don't want to let as many go as we would normally do. The other thing we're seeing is, with this generation particularly, having a cohort, having more than one person join the organization at a time really does add to their onboarding. They've got someone that's going through similar things to them. And I think employers are recognizing that it can be quite lonely in the current landscape to recruit one person as the newbie. So if they recruit 2 or more, there is a bit more shared ethos, shared experience across a cohort.
And I guess I'm sure a lot will be aware that in the budget, the Chancellor both extended and increased the apprenticeship incentives, which I know you're going to be going into the detail of in just a second, Ben. But I think that's, the first wave of incentives, I think, did a great job for shoring up employer confidence in continuing to recruit in what could have been quite an uncertain time. I suspect that the increased incentive will do the same job later this year, and we'll probably see real bringing together of recruits coming in the autumn.
Certainly. Those incentives are particularly limited to apprenticeships. Before we talk about those, I did just want to stress we do still offer commercial courses where you can pay, or students can pay for themselves. But we are seeing, and this was pre-COVID, but COVID really has only escalated this, apprenticeships are becoming now the most popular way to study for a professional accounting qualification.
Yeah, I remember, Ben, maybe 5 years ago, 5% of our learners were apprentices. What would you reckon it probably is now in terms of percentage?
I would expect by this September's intake, it will be up to high 80% of our learners on an apprenticeship program. The others, for whatever reason, maybe apprenticeships don't suit everybody, are still paying invoice as they go for the courses. But we've seen great popularity in our level 3, level 4 and level 7 programs. Something that we're in a unique position, I think, to offer in accounting is that clear progression route that you can go through the whole of your professional studies now, whether it's potentially starting with AAT into some of the later chartered qualifications, all of which can be done within an apprenticeship. One thing that I'll touch on a bit later on is level 2, where we didn't see growth to start with, and actually we weren't delivering a level 2 apprenticeship. That's changed this year for a number of reasons, which I'll touch on later. We have launched and will be onboarding our first group of level 2 accounting apprentices from September. But as Gareth mentioned earlier, one of the big things that we've seen the government doing to try and give that confidence to employers to recruit are the incentives for apprentices. They ran last year and finished actually in the spring. The new round of incentives launched from 1st of April. So you have to have recruited a new member of staff. This can't be used for upskilling existing staff members. It has to be someone that's joined your organisation from the 1st of April. The deadline for recruitment, so they need to be on your payroll by the 30th of September, and they need to have formally started an apprenticeship programme. So they have to be enrolled on a fully government authorised backed apprenticeship scheme programme by the 30th of November. If you've got those ducks in a row, and we're seeing lots of employers now starting that process, and please, 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 I would urge you to do that sooner rather than later. It's going to be very, very busy come September, and we won't be able to promise that everybody can start and be onboarded by then. So if this is attracting you, the £3,000, which is completely open for the organisation to spend in whichever way they want. It is not something that has to be used for training that particular student, but you will get £3,000 per apprentice that you recruit and onboard before the 30th of November on a programme. And we're hoping that's going to be a further catalyst. I think it's a reason why we might have seen a 1 apprentice recruitment turning into 2 now. And hopefully anyone that was kind of thinking, is this going to be the summer for doing it, that might just tip the scales towards, yes, we're going to go for it.
I think the other impact it may have, we've seen over the last sort of 8 months, a much more staggered intake than we would ever see. Historically, September is the big point where you can imagine school leavers, college leavers, university leavers tend to start their kind of new job, start their training. But because of the pandemic, because of the remote nature of a lot of workplaces, a lot of employers have kind of staggered out their intakes much more than normal. So we had, still had an intake in September, but we had a big intake in kind of November, big intake in January. We had a lot of students starting in March, April, some even in May. I suspect the incentive, because they have to be on payroll by the end of September and then training by the end of November, I suspect that will bring it back together into a kind of more tight period potentially. Although who knows, he may extend again in some way.
Another thing we're seeing is a more structured onboarding process. And this is being led by employers, but we're fully supporting it, where we've seen a number of employers now, although people aren't starting with them until late August, early September, have already put in diarised events to help with their onboarding. I'm going to a couple where we're actually getting to meet the apprentices early to give them a bit of an overview of their programme. We were super excited earlier this year to work in collaboration with AstraZeneca on their first accounting apprenticeship programme. And I've got an onboarding event with them, and they're actually inviting parents and carers and guardians of the young people that are joining them over the summer. And it's something just to think about. It's not just about hitting the deadlines for those incentives, but trying to structure it in a way that you do fully embrace the young people joining. You make them feel very, very welcome, and also try not to give them the chance to disappear off the radar for a few months between offering them a job and them actually starting. I think with COVID, that's going to be very, very welcome. These young people have had a particularly hard time coming out of school, university education settings in the last couple of years. So, but by you going that extra mile to make them feel welcome to running some onboarding events. And I know, Gareth, it's something you've been doing lots of work with our employers on. I'll share with you some of the resources we've made freely available to employers to help with that onboarding process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, particularly with the apprenticeships, I think employers do need to think about, as early as they possibly can, just to make sure that the right resources and the right processes are being put into place.
Final point on apprenticeships I just wanted to touch on very briefly were the funding bans. Anyone that has looked into apprenticeships in the past, the government mandate funding caps for each of the various standard levels. And they are currently going through a consultation process, and that could reduce the funding available. We hope this will not be a short, sharp announcement and then it's implemented. We hope there will be a bit of a lead time to any of this happening, but that could potentially be another reason why you want to lock in the apprenticeship funding, because once you've signed up an apprentice, the funding at that point is agreed for the length of their program. If you delay signing up or recruiting, you do run the risk of the funding bands being reduced, which means there is less funding for their training available. Let's have a look next at the professional bodies. So as well as working very closely with employers, something we've always done, but I feel increased over the pandemic, is work very, very closely with the accounting awarding bodies. And Gareth's been in regular communication with all of the heads of the various bodies we work with. So a quick overview for each of them. Let's start with CIMA. So CIMA were actually, I feel, the first one of the professional bodies we deal with to really get to grips with the exams and ongoing progress of students during the pandemic. We'd already seen quite an uptake in CIMA programs, lots of virtual finance offices in practice firms starting to look towards CIMA, maybe seeing it as a more digitally aware program, something that actually differentiates people in those more outsourced virtual finance teams from the traditional audit, accounts and tax departments. Always had a place in the public sector and in industry employers as well. But going back to the pandemic, it was just over a year ago that CIMA said, we are fully sorted. All of our assessments are going to be available remotely. And they were nervous, as were the students, as were, if I confess, I was as a tutor teaching students, but they went really, really well. The CIMA syllabus suited the remote exams because lots of the CIMA assessments are on demand. So it does spread out the number of students all wanting an exam at the same time on the same day. But very, very quickly, the feedback was analysed by CIMA, and they announced, look, we're not just going to limit the remote assessments to COVID. We're going to roll this out and continue this for the longer term. So I'm pleased to say that as we sit here today and for the future, CIMA exams for all exams at all levels will be available remotely. Now, when we talk about remote exams, for anyone that's not aware, this is the ability for the student to sit their exam from anywhere with a stable internet connection and a computer that will run the exam software. So it really has freed up students. I know lots of CIMA students work in tight reporting cycles at work, and therefore scheduling exams has been one other hassle that they've had to deal with. This does make it a bit more flexible. I'll talk about some of the overviews of remote exams across the board once we've been through each of the individual qualifications. The final thing I wanted to say on CIMA was they are currently offering a free resit. I think to try and give students the confidence during the pandemic to book an exam slot to actually get going to sit the assessments, they said we will honour a free resit within a limited time frame, and like everything, terms and conditions apply. But I think they were also very pleased with the uptake of that, and so they have continued it. The current free resit offering is running until the 31st of July. So if you're sitting there with any friends, colleagues, people that you work with who are CIMA students, please remind them that that free resit offer is currently available. It might just be the push they need to say, great, I'm going to therefore aim to book an exam slot. Moving on to the AAT. So the next qualification, Association of Accounting Technicians. Their assessments have continued to run within centres. And we've been very, very lucky. Once a lockdown started to relax in the summer last year, we opened up our centre in Cambridge, and we also opened up our centres in Norwich and Chelmsford, where we were inviting limited numbers of students to book slots. It's been the only activity we've actually held in our offices, but we appreciated that the AAT students had no other alternative than to go to a physical venue. So we have invested lots of time and energy in making our businesses fully set up for COVID secure assessments, and students have successfully been coming in to sit exams. The AAT, however, realised that the other professional bodies were running remotely invigilated assessments, and so we were asked to partake in a pilot earlier this year for some of the level 2 units, which went really, really well. And I'm pleased to say from May running into June and July, there is now a wider rollout for AAT assessments being done remotely at levels 2 and levels 3. At the moment, those of you that know AAT, the final level is level 4, and there is no current plans or availability for remote exams in that space. But we'll continue to work with the AAT on this, and obviously continue to support learners to make a choice between coming to us to sit the exam or sitting remotely if that works for them. One other thing that I've got here is a change. This is quite a detailed one, but if you've got any AAT students that you deal with, if they are a level 3 student, there is a change coming this year to their level 3 syllabus. It's a relatively minor change, but for the students affected, it will seem like a big thing. Currently, there is a synoptic assessment at the end of their level that combines both the use of Excel spreadsheets and their knowledge of ethics and prior units in that syllabus. That's running, and the last sitting for that synoptic is this July. So we're currently finishing off classes for that, and we've got some top-up sessions that are still running. After July, those exams are being split into 2. So the next scheduled sitting for those is September, where students will sit the synoptic exam separately to the spreadsheets assessment, which will run at a separate time. So if you've got a level 3 learner, tell them to look out for that, contact their training provider, or give them my contact details and I can talk them through. The final thing from an AAT perspective, and this is probably the biggest thing on the radar for AAT, is their change to the syllabus that was meant to happen this year, but got deferred. And so it will now launch in February 2022. So they're calling this Quals 22. And from February next year, it will go live for assessments. Like always, there are some transitional rules. So students in February will be given the choice of sitting the old assessment, and they will run for a further just over 12-month period. So they can finish off a level, but we are encouraging early adoption. We're great believers in the new syllabus being more fit for purpose. It's been a while since we've had an AAT update syllabus, so we will be working on new courses from February running with new material for the new assessments. Gareth, I know you've been very, very close to this and working alongside the AAT. I think your view is this is a very big change from anything you've seen in certainly recent years from the AAT.
Yeah, probably 20 years. I mean, ordinarily the AAT would change their syllabus every 3 years, but the last change was in 2016, which I'm sure everyone will agree, a lot has happened in the accounting world in the last 5 or 6 years, not just with the pandemic, but with the impact of automation, the change in skill sets. You know, this is the biggest change I can remember in a couple of decades. It's not just a reshuffling of content and a changing of a few names of papers, which is often the way. This is a very profound change. They've merged some papers to create some really large exams now, which are going to be more challenging for students. They've introduced some new themes and content around things like technology, sustainability, you know, really relevant things. I think it's a great development. You know, it is a great move forward for the qualification. I think it strikes a lovely balance between preserving the robust technical fundamentals that employers love AAT for, you know, the double entry, the suspense accounts, the consolidations, the tax computations, really protects those technical basics, but introducing some really kind of future focused, I think, commercial areas and kind of business focused areas. You know, I think they're very conscious that, you know, young adults, young trainees at increasingly young ages are engaging with clients, engaging with internal stakeholders, are having to give advice. And, you know, when I was a trainee, I was a graduate, and, you know, I was in my 3rd year before they let me loose talking to people. I was probably, you know, 23 before I was allowed to talk to people. You know, they know that now young adults coming straight out of school at 17, 18 are potentially talking to colleagues in other departments or external stakeholders. So they've really upped the game in terms of some of those commercial awareness aspects. But it has made it a more challenging qualification. It's a more robust qualification. It'll be, you know, it's going to be an even better foundation for those students that then progress from AAT up to ACCA, CIMA, ICAW, the sort of level 7 qualifications. It's going to be an even greater springboard, I think, into those higher level qualifications. But it's tougher. It is harder. There's no getting away from that. Particularly, they have removed quite a lot of the current duplication in content. You know, at the moment, if you fast track a student, so if they don't do all of level 2, or if they go straight in at level 3, a bright student will probably cope, because we do have, you know, we do repeat teaching of some of the basics at different levels. You know, you see double entry at level 3 as well as level 2, so it doesn't matter if they go straight in. You know, things like index numbers you see in about 4 different papers in different places. They've actually removed a lot of that duplication, which I think is great, because we're not constantly have to reteach the same material to students, but it does mean it's going to expose any knowledge gaps much more harshly to students who don't have an accounting A level or a business studies A level. They will find it an awful lot harder to go straight in at level 3 or to shortcut the level 2 studies. Even now, I mean, one thing we've got to bear in mind is even a student who has done an accounting A level won't have actually sat an accounting A level. Even a student who's done a business studies A level won't have actually sat an exam for their business studies A level because of the current situation and because of you know, tutor assessed grades. You know, and to drop them straight in at level 3 with some of the tough, beefy papers that are now at level 3, I think that's going to be quite a tall order for some of these young adults so affected by the pandemic. So our view, it's going to change for quite a lot of students, maybe the entry points that they may, you know, we're advising more students who would want to come in at level 2 who in the past might have gone in at level 3. The pathways, we think more students are going to find a real benefit from doing all of level 2 rather than just shortcutting and fast tracking it. That then will have an impact on timescales. You know, obviously, if you're going to do all of level 2, whereas historically you might have gone in at level 3, it is going to extend the timescales to finish AAT. Although that's not necessarily a bad thing. It does mean you'll have the trainees for that bit longer. They tend to therefore become a bit more loyal to their employer. if you do use AAT, I would strongly recommend, if you aren't already looking at how these changes are going to affect that, there's a link on the slide that we circulated where we've done a nice little overview of the key changes and the implications of those changes. And there's even a link to a recording of an employer session we ran where the AAT came along, and one of me and Ben's expert colleagues, Crystal, did an overview. She actually helped write the AAT's new qualification, so she's very, very close to some of these changes. So, you know, if you use AAT, well worth getting on top of that, and don't wait till 2022. That's the danger, is because the qualification doesn't come in till next year. I think a lot of people are just kicking the can down the road a bit. If you're recruiting people who will train AAT this autumn, they will end up on the new qualification. So it's worth thinking about that sooner rather than later. But thanks, Ben.
Cool, thank you, Gareth. So the next qualification, ICAW, Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, they've also launched the remotely invigilated assessments. So for their on-demand exams, the first 6 papers of what they call the certificate or CFAB level, they're available remotely. They are still offering those exams in physical centres that students can book a slot if they would rather go to a fixed location to sit them, but they are all available on demand, sat from home or in their workplace. Session exams, so the ICAW traditional exam sittings have been held 4 sittings a year for professional or 2 sittings a year for advanced. Students so far this year for those sittings, and we literally just had one for professional exams last week, were given a choice of, do you go to your traditional exam venue and book a slot to travel to the site of the exam hall, or would you rather sit remotely? And we are expecting that to continue. Certainly it's available for the July exams coming up, and we expect it also to be extended for the next round of professional exams in September. A couple of big pieces of ICAW news if you've got students or you're looking at students doing these exams. The first one is their willingness to embrace the modern world of data analytics. And one of the ways they're doing it is putting analytics software front and center in some of their exam modules. So for the audit exam and their advanced level corporate reporting exam, they are actually getting students to interrogate data using inflow software live within their assessments. And you'll see in the link in the slides, there is a link to watch a YouTube video on how that inflow system works. It's something that we feel is a good development. It's a very practical way of testing those auditing analytical skills that actually get students experiencing something in the exam like they would be experiencing at work when they are doing that working with the data. The final thing from ICAW is their switch off of all printed material. This is something that the ICAW made the decision of when they launched their new syllabus at the start of this year. They no longer publish and provide any hard copy textbooks or question banks. Everything to do with ICAW is published on their digital bookshelf. This has helped them in their Going Green credentials. I think they have achieved carbon neutrality in the first professional body to do so. And part of that is the push for not sending out lots and lots of printed material to students. Those digital materials are available to them 24/7, wherever they are. So the days of students forgetting their books when they turn up in class are gone with ICAW because they've got access to them on their smartphones or enabled devices. Final qualification to touch on are the ACCA. So they had another big exam sitting last week. Slightly differently, the ACCA chose in the UK to run all of last week's exams in physical locations. So those exams ran in Peterborough, they ran in Stevenage, they ran in Norwich. Before that, they did run the March sitting as remote. But what the ACCA up until now have been reluctant to do is give the students the choice between the two. It's been the whole sitting one or the other. They have got the remotely invigilated exam software, so it's there as a contingency, and they obviously had to implement it earlier in the year when lockdown restrictions meant physical exams were not able to be conducted. We don't know what their longer term plan is there. I believe they will keep going with remote invigilated exams in the longer term, but for September, the next round of exams, the only choice that students have currently got is to book an in-centre physical slot. ACCA update their syllabus in September every year. This year, there is syllabus updates to largely all of the exam units. If you've got ACCA students in your teams, I put a link in these notes to their exam resources. And if they find the individual papers they are studying for, they'll find a nice syllabus update guide from the ACCA directly for each individual exam unit. Well worth pointing them in the direction of, because the June exams are the last of the old. So this is very much the transition towards the new syllabus. And those syllabuses will launch in September for the September exam sitting, but then run through December and March and June next year. Final thing from ACCA is their practical experience requirements. So if you've got any ACCA students in your team, you'll probably know they have to document some workplace evidence to then apply for their membership once they've completed their exams. I'm actually speaking at an event run by the ACCA next month in July. And if you've got ACCA students working with you, it would be well worth sharing the link to that meeting so they can come along lunchtime on the 6th of July to hear me and the ACCA talk about what they need to do. If you're sitting there as their training manager, you've got a part to play in that process, because you have to go off and sign their PER once they've completed it. So feel free to register yourself if you want to come as a workplace mentor and find out a bit more about the ACCA practical experience requirements. That's a quick roundup of the 4 syllabuses, but I did just want to pause to talk for a couple of moments about remotely invigilated exams, because it's been thrust upon students, and thankfully it was available, because lots of students wouldn't have been able to sit exams with any alternative arrangements not being available. But I feel, and I'm sure Gareth would echo this, these remote exams are here to stay. Lots of the bodies were saying we were already looking at this, but we were probably thinking this was more 3-4 years down the line. COVID has obviously meant they brought them in much quicker, but the cat's out of the bag now. I think students are willing to embrace this. Some tips: make sure your students are following all of the guidance on the testing of software. There have been problems with remotely invigilated exams, and the problems always hit the news and particularly social media. But on back analysis, the vast majority of those problems have actually been self-created by the students themselves, not following the instructions, not testing the software before their exams go live. The second thing to look for, particularly for the on-demand exams, is they are certain of the time slots available. For example, SEMA exams are available 24 hours a day. And we have had a couple of our students that have booked exam slots to sit at 3 o'clock in the morning instead of 3 o'clock at the end of their afternoon. And that's not a problem if they spot it early, but it is a problem if they expect to log in for a 3 o'clock exam only to be told you've missed your exam slot. It was actually 12 hours previous. The next one, and if you looked at any of the clever messaging that the one group were talking about for this session, they talked about cats and cups of tea. That's really talking about the remote exams from the perspective of making sure the students are aware of the requirements for the surroundings to sit those exams. Obviously, for many years, and I'm sure lots of you joining the call can remember going to exams where you were in a very isolated desk in a hall, there was complete silence, there was somebody invigilating. Remote exams are invigilated by people on webcam. So they've got the facility to log in and look at whatever is being displayed on the webcam of the student sitting the exam. And they use incredibly good software to detect any unusual or abnormal behavior happening in that exam environment. So we have heard unfortunate stories. One poor chap had his exam interrupted by his mum, bless her, who brought him a cup of tea 2 hours into a 3-hour exam. Sadly, because she was then in the room and put something on the desk, his exam was picked up by the software and was actually voided. So he wasn't able to complete that exam and get a result and needed to reschedule and resit. We've also heard people talking about pets coming in and interrupting their exams. And there was some joke, and boy, did we need it on 1st of April this year in the midst of lockdown for April Fool's Day, where the ACCA announced that they would be allowing cats into remote exams as long as they were registered up front and the students were giving their pets names. Obviously, that's not the case, but it did cause us to kind of think, right, we need to be telling students, just make sure we don't expect them to lock the door behind them, but make sure there is a notice on the door, exam in progress, and no one is going to come bursting in through it. If they're doing it at work, try and accommodate to find them a nice quiet space. If they could book a space in a private meeting room, that would be ideal. The final tip is the internet connection. The internet connection, as we've all found in lockdown, does tend to fluctuate a bit when you're at home. We strongly suggest students find a way to hardwire into their internet router when they're doing their exams. So please, please encourage them. Remote exams are nothing to be scared of. And dare I say it, these are going to be normal in the next 2 to 3 years. But for the first time a student does one, it is very nervous. And we play our part in that, encouraging them to do it. You as their employers can also play a role supporting them, making sure they've got everything they need. Final bit from me really is just an overview of what First Intuition are doing and have been doing. So some plugs really for some things that are coming up or things that might be useful to members of your team. The first one is some brilliant employer resources that Gareth, me and the team at FI have been working on. A really, really great library of tips to do with recruitment. All of the stuff around the apprenticeship incentives is on there. Some links to sessions we've run on onboarding. And the link is in the notes when you get them. Please go and have a look at those employer resources. We are incredibly proud. We've put these together. They are all freely accessible by anybody, whether you're using First Intuition for your training or not. We don't mind. We just want people to be aware of the stuff that we've got there because it really is a great resource to use. Gareth's done a great job of getting employers together and inviting other people to speak at what we call our think tank forums. I've put a link here to some previous episodes that you can go back over and look at. Gareth's run them on equality and diversity in the workplace. He's run them on data analytics. He's run a recent one on onboarding this summer's intake with hints and tips from very respected industry professionals in those areas. So please go and check out our employer parts of the website because all of that stuff is there. And as I say, it's freely available to anybody. Some of the programs we're launching. So we mentioned that level 2 apprenticeships we think are going to be a big growth area. For a couple of reasons, this year was a very good year for us to launch them. One, we feel they are more aligned with the school leaver, particularly this year's school leavers that maybe haven't had the education experience and probably need a bit more care and attention when they start their programs. It also aligns with the AAT syllabus. And as Gareth mentioned, the fact that level 2 into level 3 into level 4 is going to be more of a requirement going forward because of the clear differentiation between the topics covered at each levels. We've got a session this Friday. So hot off the press at 8:30 on Friday this week, you can register for a session in the morning to hear our colleague Crystal talk about the level 2 apprenticeship standards in more detail and why it might be useful for you to consider for anybody joining your teams. We're also launching a new CIMA product. So this is launching over the summer on the back of the fantastic feedback we've had on our Zoom virtual classes. We're actually launching our CIMA program going forward as more of a blended structure. We're going to be running virtual Zoom tuition courses with 2-day classroom revision sessions for each module. And we've got our grand launch event at 10:30 on the 1st of July, which I'm conducting. So please, if you've got any CIMA students or you train CIMA in your teams, register for that and come and hear about our exciting new program of CIMA courses for the rest of this year and beyond. Our free AAT revision sessions. I think this is what I am most proud of during lockdown from our team. We have been running free revision sessions for anybody, whether they study with FI, study somewhere else, not studying with anyone formally. We run free sessions every week on Zoom. We record the sessions and release the recordings as well. And we have had phenomenal numbers of students attending these sessions during lockdown to the point that they are continuing for the foreseeable future. If you've got AAT members in your team, please share that link. They can register for free, no obligation. Come along, drop in, drop out as much as they want to from those revision sessions. But the feedback we've got has been absolutely phenomenal on those. I also run a weekly Zoom drop-in session, question and answer every Wednesday since before this time last year for over 12 months now. We've gone live every Wednesday, 6 till 7 in the evenings, just to have a drop-in for students to come and ask us questions. Increasingly, we get a guest speaker along and record them as a podcast. I'm really, really proud to say we've now had over 10,000 downloads of our podcast from students and other people in our industry. And we're actually joined by the One Group tonight to do a bit of a recruitment special. So if you're interested, you can subscribe to the podcast on the link, or encourage people to come to the live sessions as we are recording them at 6 o'clock every Wednesday. Finally, and to finish with, beyond accounting, a couple of exciting things that we are doing. The first one is leadership and management training. So we are fully endorsed by the CMI to offer level 3 and level 5 leadership and management training, something that we are seeing lots of employers using to lock in qualified accounting staff, but also offering to wider staff to give them some recognized qualification and a bit of a way to make them think twice about looking elsewhere for alternate roles. And then a bit of a whet your appetite, data analytics. Watch this space. Gareth's working on a program where hopefully we will be launching some pilot data analytics programs later this year, early next year. So if that's something of interest, keep in contact with myself and Gareth. That's me done. Our contact details are on the screen. All I would like to say is, if you would like what I'm calling a health check or MOT for your studiers or your students, get in contact with me. It's something we'll come in and do for free. If it's looking at the implications of the AAT syllabus, looking at the implications of using apprenticeships, I'm happy to come and sit down with you and any of your team or students to talk it through, to see if there are any ways you could change your study programs or plans.
I thought I might just chip in there, Ben. So I was just smiling there at Mark's comment. How rude. I am Welsh by background, but actually Scottish. So I'm looking forward to Friday. Actually, we'll see how the football match on Friday goes. But I just wanted to actually back up what Ben was just saying there. You know, we are actually moving as an organisation beyond just accountancy training into leadership management and data analytics. Firstly, because there's an increasing overlap with the skill set that trainee accountants need in those sorts of areas. I think of it like a 3-bubble Venn diagram of accountancy and finance, leadership and sort of digital data, and actually they are increasingly overlapping in terms of the skill sets required in a finance professional. But as Ben mentioned, I think it's an increasingly important part of post-qualification education as a recruitment tool for actually attracting candidates into an organisation. I think employers are recognising that it's not just that period of qualifying as an accountant where they need to invest in and support staff. It's actually lifelong learning, isn't it? It's a long time after that. And I thought, Sam, actually, you might have quite an interesting perspective on that side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It tees me up quite nicely, because I think a big thing that we're seeing in the marketplace at the minute is an issue for a lot of businesses is post-qualification retention. I think a lot of people are happy and probably tied to the business through training contracts, etc. When they get to the end of that, they probably have that itchy feet moment of, am I going to stagnate? Am I going to stall? What's next for me? I think a big theme of what we've heard from a lot of applicants, particularly been probably accelerated over the last 12, 18 months, has been around what next for me. And if there isn't that post-qualification, retraining, learning and development, further qualifications that they can do within their current business, that's probably a time when they start looking around to see what else is out there. So yeah, I'm sure while you guys offering that and businesses using training budgets to further qualify their people will only aid retention. Just to jump in, I guess, as well, whilst got the opportunity to update on recruitment and what's gone on over the last 12, 18 months. Last year, not much. In all honesty, we could have shut up shop, and we were fearful that we might have to at one point last year. Thankfully, furlough saw us through that, because most people understandably shut up shop, and unless there was a really, really critical hire within their business, they didn't do a lot. This year has been chalk and cheese. It has been absolutely crazy, particularly probably the last 6-8 weeks in particular, I think, as we're sort of edging out of full lockdowns into some level of normality. The market's gone absolutely crazy. And this presents a lot of challenges for businesses looking to attract the best talent out there. There's some names on this call who I know we've had some fun experiences with over the last few weeks and months in recruiting for them. I think from an applicant, from a candidate, from an employee point of view, whatever you want to label the workers in your business as, we've had more thinking time than ever before over the last 12 months to really reflect on all issues of our lives, without the distraction of as many summer holidays and all the other fun stuff that we've had stripped away. I think a lot of people have really been analysing their roles. Am I happy here? Am I developing here? Is it giving me everything I want? Do I have the right work-life balance? And there's been a lot of people therefore decide that no, they don't have that within their current role. And it creates quite a fluid market because people are starting to move roles to try and find, you know, what really is going to keep them happy. It presents a real challenge when you go to hire if you don't offer those things. To share a little bit of a horror story from last week, I've checked, and this particular hiring manager and business aren't on the call, but we had an incident last week where a company offered a really credible candidate who had 2 or 3 offers on the table. They wanted them to work 1 weekend in 4. They wanted them to sign a 40-hour contract with no remote working, no flexibility, no flexible working. And that is being stacked up against businesses now who are happy to almost bend over backwards to accommodate these people. You know, you work from where you want. We don't care if you're in at 9:30 or 10 after the school run. You do what works for you. And I think there's been a lot more of a shift away from, you know, tangible mercenary parts of the package to actually what well-being do they offer? What's the working environment like? Do they offer remote working? And these parts of the packages now, I'd say, are almost as important, if not more important, than what salary is being offered. Candidates are asking us, you know, the first thing that we used to speak to people about, or the first question that they used to ask us when we called them about a role, what's it paying? What's the bonus? And now that's almost secondary to, oh, did they do remote working? What hours is it? Well, I need to go on site every day. So I think if any of you are out there and thinking of hiring at the minute, it's probably a question really as well for sort of your HR EVP teams as well, to just really think about what is the candidate incentive for them to join your business. 3-4 years ago, a company thought that they were doing the world a favor by having a vacancy. We're hiring, apply to this job, join us. Now it's very much, you know, shifted towards the candidate. What's in it for the candidate, and why do they want to come and do that role with your business? Because it's probably likely that there's 3 or 4 other businesses out there who are trying to attract a very similar talent. So you do have to be clever, and you do have to really think about what's going to draw them and make your business opportunity stand out from the crowd. Because it's candidate shy out there, it really is. And I think that's because of lower periods of hiring several years ago. Knock-on effect last year with probably a lot less trainees being hired. So now we're 12 months down the line, and there's less people in the business at a skilled level, so everyone's fighting for the same level of skill to come in. So it's tough out there, most definitely from a hiring perspective. I think that's it from a content perspective. If there's any questions that anyone has, now is a good time to ask them before we disappear. So feel free to use the chat function if you haven't already. Give everyone a moment or two to see if there are any questions filtering their way through.
Actually, Ben, just for you, actually, I did have a question offline from Kaylee, who's on the call, just asking, because have the ACCA confirmed yet whether September and/or December will be in centre, or are we assuming that will be their plan?
September exam slots are open for booking, and the only option is in centre. And I think that will continue. The June exams last week were all in centre. Obviously, they've got the ability to flip it over, but as I mentioned in the presentation, so far they've been reluctant to open up the dual option. It's always been one or the other. And while they can open centres, my gut feel is September will be in centre. Let's hope that December we're not in another lockdown. Let's really hope that. But they've got the facility to flip it over if they needed to. But my gut feel is they will be back to physical venues for September, and therefore onto December as well.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I think that's plenty of opportunity for people to ask questions online now. I know you both have offered to answer anything offline, and we'll share your contact details are obviously on that slide now, which will be distributed. And similarly, feel free to reach out to me if there's any more recruitment focused questions. But if not, Ben, Gareth, really appreciate your time and input as always. That's been really, really good. Thank you to all the attendees. We'll leave you.